Well, that's a new feature for Zoom. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Lee. How are you?
I'm very good. I think Zoom has done a bit of an update today because everything looks different. The record button has just gone missing. I can't even see it. And when I hit start webinar, it then recorded automatically. So it's kind of done me a favor as well to save me from forgetting to hit the record button. But I'm so glad you read my message this morning about I'm wearing a grey jumper and a white t-shirt, and you thought, you know what? That sounds amazing. I will wear the exact same,
Yeah,
just so that we're, coordinating very well.
yeah, I know. Slight wardrobe malfunction on our side now, but obviously just two style icons having a chat on a Friday morning.
Yeah, if anyone else is wearing a grey over t-shirt and a white t-shirt underneath, let us know. Morning, Jade.
Morning,
Loving
Jade.
the matching vibes. Thank you very much. We're it's what we do. It's good feedback. Thank you very much. Um, we will kick things off quite quickly because I think the overall feedback we get from our sessions are we rabbit on. People love the discussion points of what we talk about. It's not so much death by PowerPoint. We do like to share our views and thoughts, which is always interesting because we see a lot of AI, and you are working with AI and in AI and building AI. So it's a good talking point. So, as always, if you've got any questions or if you've got any concerns or any problems, air them out. This is a good time to raise any of those concerns. Tom is very knowledgeable at what he does. Saturn is an amazing firm, and you'll see and hear a little bit more about what they're doing over the course of the next hour. Thank you for saying hi in the chat so we know that everything's working. As always, when you exit today's webinar, you will be asked to complete a feedback form. It's very important to us. It's the only way we improve in how we deliver our sessions. Also, if you do require CPD from today, on the feedback form, that's where you can request your CPD certificate, and we do our very best to get it out to you on the same day. If not, it will be Monday morning that you'll get an email from the amazing Jade Ling. Moving on to that, who we are as a business, the Financial Planning Club. We are a team of four: Amanda, Lewis, myself, and Jade. I wanted to put my LinkedIn QR code up on the screen as well. After every one of our webinars, we do create a lot of content off the back of it. We create a lot of snippets. It will go in as part of my newsletter. So do connect with me and stay along with what we're getting up to and who we're speaking to, because I'm sure you'll find it very insightful. But as always, we couldn't do what we do if we didn't have the backing of every single one of these amazing firms that seems to grow week in, week out. It's great content delivered by some of our awesome collaborators. So these not only play a part of delivering content to you guys and girls every Friday, but they also directly support each and every one of our club members as they're navigating change through their businesses. There's somebody here that has been there, done it, seen it, and got the t-shirt, and more than happy to support firms as they adapt to new piece of tech, new platforms, CIPs, marketing, compliance, recruitment, whatever it may be. There are some really cool firms that now partner with the club and can support you and your business. So do feel free to check any of those out at any time. They're all on our website as well. Moving on, as people know, and as some of you might have well come from, we do like to host a community. And I promise you one day you will see compliance on there. And I promise you every week I keep saying I'm going to add a compliance WhatsApp group. It is going to get done next week. I promise you next week the compliance group is coming. I know some people are probably thinking compliance ain't that great, mate. Don't worry about, stressing yourself about creating the group. But there is a demand for it. So we're going to put it out there. The whole purpose of our communities is that you get to virtually network with people that are playing a very similar role to what you do in your business. So whether that is as a business owner and an advisor, power planner, ops manager, whatever role you play within your business, we have a separate community to support you. Any question that you ask within that group is usually responded to by somebody doing the exact same job in another business within the hour. I always recommend that you mute the WhatsApp groups because they do go off all of the time, especially around tax year end and budgets and everything else. So, it is quite on trend with what's going on in the market as well. So if you do want to be a part of any of our WhatsApp communities, you can do so again on the feedback form. Let us know what community you want to be a part of, and we'll do our best to get you in there as soon as we can. Club Lives, which are what you're all attending today, expert-led, really good, insightful, practical webinars, if you like, all CPD accredited. The Financial Planning Podcast is where you can hear other business owners and their stories of running and growing a business. What we've got coming up, a couple of very interesting webinars. We're with Aspen, investment solutions for shorter time horizons. I think I mentioned this last week, but there was quite a talking point on one of I think it was the advisor WhatsApp community about options for clients with shorter time horizons and what that looks like. So they've put together a webinar to address those. We've got advisory AI as well. We'll be diving into how to avoid common pitfalls when implementing AI in your advice firm. And then finally, we're on to Timeline, where we're going to be focusing on how to drive consistent outcomes through scalable investment technology. So feel free to register for any of the webinars. If you can't attend, we will always send you a recording as well. So it'd be good to see you next week. Well, not next week. They're actually giving me a couple of weeks off, 16th of April. So it's very nice at a club team. I think it's because we're at half term now as well. So we know a lot of people tend to go away for the next week or two as well. Joining me today, Tom. This is probably second, third, could even be our fourth webinar together. Always love what you guys are doing. Tom is part of the founding team at Saturn, really leading partnerships across the onboarding, retention, and client development as well. You're working closely with strategic partners to help deliver financial planning at scale globally as well. Saturn is a little bit different, purely focused on using data and AI to automate operations, compliance, and insights, creating a single source of truth, making back office systems far more efficient. I hope I've done you justice there, Tom. With Saturn, as far as I'm aware, it's not about solving a single problem within a business. It's end-to-end processes and operations. So it's a really good piece of tech that I'm sure Tom was going to tell you a little bit more about. Tom, thank you very much for joining us again today. As always, everybody asks a couple of questions and submits some answers to questions we ask them when they sign up for our webinars. Mainly IFAs and planners in the room today, which is very, very good. Current adoption and use. So AI adoption is mixed, with many firms still exploring why others are using it for meeting notes, admin, and report writing. The real entry-level basic stuff, isn't it, Tom? I think when people start toying with AI, it's like many people, it's the meeting notes, it's, ChatGPT. Everybody's using ChatGPT these days. I do have a bit of a bugbearer with ChatGPT, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. I used to get on well with it. I used to like it a lot, but I feel like it was telling me some porkies this week, as it told me West Ham was going to be relegated and Spurs was going to stay up. So I'm not too happy with ChatGPT at the moment. I'm looking at other options. So if anybody's got any suggestions, do let me know, because I don't believe that's going to happen. So overall, there's a really good demand, but people are needing clarity on how to really use AI effectively, aren't they, Tom? Really, do you find that at the moment as well when you're speaking to new firms that are implementing AI?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good morning, Lee. Good morning to the club. Thanks again for having us on. I think it's webinar three. So
Webinar
this is
three.
our third one. So yeah, excited to be back. Thanks for the time and space. Yeah, I think
Always,
adoption
mate.
across advice firms is still very mixed, which I think is really interesting, because often when you speak to advisors, they think that everyone else is way like much further ahead of them,
Yeah.
and they're missing out, and they're way behind, and they're getting left behind. And there's a kind of slightly frantic urge to try and do something quickly
Mm,
just to keep up, which, if you look at a lot of the statistics, is just not the case. Dimensional, who are now part of the club as well, have done some amazing research on actually how firms are using AI. And most firms are still at the kind of meeting note conversation position. So, if you're on the webinar today or watching it back and think, I've not done any of this, I'm way
mm,
further behind than I should be, you're not alone. Like, most firms are not fully adopting and embracing
mm,
artificial intelligence yet. And hopefully throughout the webinar today, we'll talk about some of the do's and don'ts when you start to explore that. And for the firms that have started to implement AI, where we've seen it be adopted really effectively, and maybe some of the mistakes that both we and firms have made when they're adopting AI.
yeah, absolutely. Because Mistakes is something that we're going to make when we work with AI, right? And it's firms like yourself and others out there that are trying to really keep you within a safe framework, isn't it? Really, that I think that's quite important, isn't it? Having safe guidelines, safe barriers, and working within secure frameworks. I think that's most important to a lot of firms at the moment. How secure is the data? Um, does it get creative? Does it make stuff up? Because clearly, ChatGPT made up the fact that West Ham are going to get relegated. So there is a little bit of making up around here. But yeah, it's keeping people, and people just want sense of peace of mind that they are, safe whilst using AI, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think, data security is the non-negotiable here.
Mm,
Um, Financial planners are having the most kind of confidential, sensitive, important conversations that a lot of their clients will ever have. A lot of the time, they'll be having conversations that those people haven't had with their wider family. So that information that sits within that meeting is
mm,
incredibly important. So, before anyone starts to use any AI systems, that check just to make sure that A, where is the data stored? B, is this AI provider using my data to train and improve their models? In which case, often it's going over to America, means that it's not in a position where you should be using that system. So it's one of the things that us, and I know you've got a webinar with Advisory AI, people like Eveni, Panapal, making sure you're working with an industry specific tool, I think for
mm,
me is a non-negotiable. I know a lot of people will be using ChatGPT and Copilot and Claude and other things,
mm.
which don't get me wrong, are incredible tools. But people should be anonymizing client data. And if they're not, I'd really think carefully about that. So for me, that's always step one. Make sure the data security is in place before you start getting excited about some of the shiny tools that us and others have got in the market.
Because they are very shiny. Some of them look absolutely awesome, but in practice, it's not always where we need it to be. Um, Tom, the floor is yours. Let's kick things off. There are a couple of polls today as well, so I'll throw them up as and when we need to. If you can participate and give us your insights as to where you're feeling with the polls, that'd be amazing.
Cool, perfect. Just checking you can see my screen okay, Lee. We've got
I
the right
can
slide.
indeed, mate. I can indeed.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this morning I wanted to use the time to talk about the kind of evolution of AI, and I think Lee's point about kind of where most advisors are in that poll really kind of puts this point forward as to why I think it's really important. There's been a lot of evolution of AI outside of our industry, and I don't think our industry is keeping pace yet. I think we've learned a lot over the last 2 years, particularly 12 months, as to what's working, what's not working, and kind of what's coming next. So I want to use this time we've got together to talk about, I suppose, the lessons we've gone through working with the partner firms here at Saturn, and hopefully give some good, interesting intel, case studies, stories, as to what I think firms can be doing and should be doing next. I think there's a lot of lessons, and one of the benefits of not being the first people to do things is you get to learn from some of the mistakes of previous people. So hopefully we'll go through some of that today. One thing on your introduction, I will slightly correct, is you used the word automate. And for us at Saturn, that's a word we really
Did I?
try not to use.
Okay.
Because for us, I think AI should not be used to automate anything. It should be used to augment the way that we're doing things.
Oh,
And
that's
it
what I
should
meant. That's perhaps it was just slip of the tongue. That's what it was. I did have my glasses on, Tom. That's what it
There you
was.
go. There you go. But I think that the word automate kind of removes the human being from the loop, and it means that the AI becomes responsible for doing certain things. AI should be treated as a very junior member of staff, and you would always want to kind of check and make sure that person is doing the job to the best of their ability, but also with the client's best interests at heart. So AI should be treated the same. It should always be that the human remains in the loop of anything that's being done. So we will always talk about augment rather than automate, which I think is a really key distinguishing point,
Agreed.
just to call you out on.
Thanks, mate.
Agenda for this morning. So three kind of sections I want to go through. One, the evolution of AI and its impact on advice. Like AI is already having a huge impact on the financial advice industry. And there's some amazing stories and case studies we've got of the impact that it's having already, the time saving it's having, the fact that it's targeting some of those most mundane tasks that people have to do. So we'll talk a bit about where it is and where it's evolving from. Two, I think a really important conversation is why AI is different to traditional software. One of the, I suppose, key mistakes I see firms making is treating AI as a kind of another piece of the tech stack. And tech stacks become this very popular phrase or conversation where, every advice firm has got a CRM system and then they've got a cash flow system and then, a risk profile tool and the list goes on. And you create this kind of patchwork quilt of tech systems that you have to kind of blend and merge together. Dimensional say it's about 11 pieces of tech that people use. Adding AI as a kind of 12th piece of that tech stack for me completely misses the point. So I want to talk a bit about why I think AI is fundamentally different, both in its capacity, but also importantly in its behavior. People should not expect AI to behave the same way as a traditional SaaS software kit. It's not going to be 100% predictable and reliable, but within that lies its beauty. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And then third, what does the future of financial planning look like? And for me, this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about and discussing with Saturn partners because for us, a lot of the work that AI is doing is targeting where firms are spending time right now, which is preventing them from being in front of clients. Everyone's seen the stats, 60% of an advisor's time is spent not in front of a client. So once that 60% of time starts to get augmented by artificial intelligence and we give them back an hour, 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours a week, what do we do with that time? And that I think is a conversation that people should be having right now, because once that time gets given back, you tend to just fill it with the same stuff you've been doing. A really exciting opportunity to think about where else we could be spending that time. And for me, that comes into changing roles, changing propositions, the expansion of financial planning, the bridging of the advice gap. That I think is a really interesting conversation. So, three key agenda points. And then from a learning objectives perspective, we want to describe how AI adoption in financial advice is evolving, explain why AI is stochastic and why advice needs deterministic delivery. That comes into the behavior between technology and artificial intelligence, a really key distinguishing point. Three, to identify the common reasons AI initiatives fail at implementation. And we've got some big statistics on where we see AI initiatives fail. It's a quite staggeringly high number. And then four, to apply a practical framework to AI moving forward. And I've got four kind of key points that I'd love everyone to take home as to where I think that framework can be really, really strong. Cool. Please do put questions, comments, and stuff in the chat. I'd love to kind of get as interactive as possible rather than listening to me drone on a monologue yet again this week. So, yeah, please do jump in with comments and questions. For those that haven't heard of Saturn before, I just wanted to do a very quick introduction, then we'll get stuck into the kind of meat of the presentation. As Lee said, my name's Tom. I'm head of partnerships here at Saturn. I was the first employee in the business when there was three of us on a WeWork on laptops on our knees. So, I've seen the business grow from kind of very early stage tech startup to where we are today, which is the leading provider of AI financial services in the UK.
Are you
Um,
saying you got more than three people with you now, Tom?
yeah, a couple more than that. A
Yeah.
couple more. I think we're up to about 63. I was saying to Lee just before we started, I went skiing last week, came back into the office, and there was another four people in the office. So they was like, "Oh, is it your first day?" I was like, "No, I've been here a little while." Um, So yeah, it's very exciting seeing the kind of growth we're going through. But I think for me, it just kind of gives us the evidence that there is that real need and
Mm,
desire in the financial planning industry. I don't think there's been a more exciting time to be in financial advice. Like, granted, I'm fairly young in the industry. I've been in the industry for 10 years, but I think the kind of scope of the opportunity with this huge cascade of wealth that's happening
mm,
right now, this shift in demographics of who's going to own the wealth, and
mm,
actually what they expect from a financial planning proposition is massively changing right now. And I think there is amazing opportunity for people to come up with some incredibly innovative ways of giving
mm.
financial planning. And that's something that I'm personally very excited about.
And I think
Um,
we're just scratching the surface with all of it right now, right?
for sure. Yeah, 100%. And Saturn's mission ultimately is to kind of work behind the scenes. Like, we want to drive those human beings that are thinking about the future of planning
Mm,
forward as much as possible. Our ultimate mission is to make financial advice accessible to 1 billion people globally. Like, all of us at Saturn fundamentally believe that quality financial literacy should be a basic human right. People should, people work very hard for their money. They should have the ability to be able to accurately manage that or effectively manage that.
mm,
And we're passionate about making that possible through human-led interactions with financial planning. For us, it's not about some nutmeg robo advice style proposition. I think there is a huge place for that, don't get me wrong, but we are very passionate about the kind of human interactions between an advisor and a client, and
mm.
we want to maximize the time that human and client spend together. So our mission is to make financial advice accessible for 1 billion people. Our purpose is to build the technology to enable it to happen. We're backed by some of the leading kind of VC firms in the industry that have been early investors in OpenAI and Airbnb and Deliveroo and things like that. So we've got some amazing team internally and some teams backing us to keep driving towards that purpose and that mission. And very lucky to work with some of the leading firms in the industry. Firms like Shackleton, Perspective, James Hambro, Cooper Parry, all of varying different shapes and sizes, but about 650 now kind of planning firms that we're working with on a daily basis, which gives us some great insights, I suppose, into the common themes that we see across financial advice businesses. And of any shapes and sizes, I think a lot of the trends are very similar.
Mm,
Advisors spend too much time updating fact find information, and turnaround times for recommendation letters is too long. And the ultimate truth is that there's two key statistics which we obsess over. One is the time to give financial advice, which hasn't changed since 2019. It's about 33 days on average. And then the other is the cost to give financial advice, which is going the wrong way. And the regulator is doing some things around this. Obviously, we saw the news on Tuesday, I think it was, about periodic suitability, and hopefully that will start to ease some of that. But it's got more expensive to give financial advice. So the cost to give our product, let's say, is getting more expensive, but the actual quality of the product, the delivery, is not getting any better. So it's not a great position for the industry to be in right now.
mm,
We want to work with these firms to tackle those two head on and fundamentally believe that intelligence can reduce the cost to serve or financial advice by about 90%, because a lot of that cost goes into compliance and reporting and headcount, I suppose, as well, but headcount where the advisor is capped in their capacity.
mm.
An advisor in the UK has 100, client families. That should be 400 client families, but at no at no point should the value of the advice proposition or the quality of the advice be impacted. So the question then becomes, how do we enable incredibly personalized, high quality financial advice to be given to 100 client families per advisor? And
Mm.
those are the questions, those are the challenges that we're really excited to tackle.
Are firms of different sizes able to use AI differently? Would you say, you look at your progenies and your benchmarks, hundreds and hundreds of advisors that work under those firms. Do they adopt it differently to your one man band or your smaller firm with two, three advisors in it?
I think it's a great question. I think the one man band, the two-man band has the luxury of moving very quickly.
Okay.
And we work with a lot of one-man advisor to 3, 4, 5 advisor firm, and their decision process is incredibly quick. They will go from an initial conversation with us to implementing Saturn systems within a few weeks because they've got the luxury of making that decision.
Mm,
And then they can also change very quickly. So I think the decision to act and move could be much quicker in the smaller advice firms. And also the smaller advice firms tend to be doing a lot more stuff in their day to day. An advisor at a smaller advice firm tends to be a director. They tend to be doing a lot of the reporting, the finance, the HR, everything. So if there's other parts of their day to day that Saturn can start to tackle, you tend to
mm,
see I suppose, the impact being much quicker, I would say. When you go into the likes of Perspective, Progeny, Shackleton, Cooper Parry, Fairstone, the scale of it is just much bigger. So you tend to have a kind of longer conveyor belt of advice process. And I think the main problem that those firms tend to see is one, data triage, and then two is the kind of handover process. Both of those come from passing work from one individual to the next person. And that seems to be, for me, the kind of main sticking point in the reason why turnaround times are as long as they are right now. So most small businesses have the luxury of sitting in the office together. So an advisor can come back from his meeting or her meeting and sit down with a power planner and say, look, I had a great meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Old. This is what we want to do. Get on with it. And then the next day they can check in and see what's going on. In
mm.
the larger businesses, that work gets passed through a CRM system. It's a lot less personal with the touch of the handover, and that context sharing becomes more of a problem. So I think I suppose, short answer to your question is a lot of the problems are similar, but the scale of it means that the handover becomes more of a problem at the larger businesses, if that makes sense.
Is this in these bigger firms? Is it mandatory, or do you see advisor usage, and are they having conversations with people within the business? Say, why are you not using this, or is there no workaround? It has to be done this way.
The firms are taking different approaches. So Perspective and Fairstone are good examples of this. Perspective started off by not mandating it, and said, look, we're working with Saturn, they're our AI partner. You've got access to the meeting note system. We're doing this in a kind of tranche rollout. Who wants to be part of which tranche? And then you got kind of very strong adoption in small percentages of the advice community, which started to kind of ramp up as word got round. I think that's a nice way of starting to change processes.
Mm.
They then made the decision at Christmas to mandate it, and the adoption's gone up massively. And
Yeah.
it just brings some of those team members that are maybe slightly more resistant to change on that journey a bit quicker. Fairstone just mandated from day one. They said, "Look, this is the way we're going to work." Um, for me, I think the mandating way is a kind of rip the band-aid off quickly, get things done, and move very quickly approach that
Mm.
works very well. And I think what it starts to do is to reposition artificial intelligence away from being a kind of an advisor-led tool to
Mm.
being proper operational change. And that for me is where AI becomes a much more effective conversation when it becomes about operational change and not just about efficiency and time saving for the advice community. I think
Yeah.
efficiency and time saving for the advice community is a incredible impact that AI can have, but actually AI should be seen as proper operational change. One of the problems that firms that haven't mandated things like meeting notes out just yet are having now is that when they start to look down the advice process at things like suitability letters, the data is coming in very fragmented ways because you've
Mm.
still got some advisors that are doing handwritten notes, some advisors are typing it up on Word and passing it through email, some advisors are using Saturn and they're getting their meeting notes that way. Put yourself in a paraplanner's shoes. You've now got different data coming in different ways, and it becomes quite chaotic. You
Mm.
don't get the impacts that you need it to have. For us, meeting notes is about standardization of data as much as it is about speed. So how do we create one single way of operating? And that one single way of operating is where we see real efficiency gains.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
That takes us quite nicely onto this next slide. And for me, I spend a lot of time with firms speaking about this concept of an integrated advice process. And I know in our last webinar, Lee, we spoke quite a lot about this.
Yeah.
So if people want to look back at that and listen to us, Lee and I, going into a lot more detail about what the integrated advice process is, if I can speak this morning,
Yeah.
definitely check that out. But for me, I think this is something that we always go back to at Saturn. This kind of sets out our roadmap and it sets out our vision for where we think financial advice businesses can ultimately get to. And we think about financial advice becoming this production line ultimately. It's how do you go from onboarding to the financial plan conversation, which will include, research, analytics, cash flow, hand that over into support teams. They can look at implementation, recommendation letters, go through compliance checking, go through the annual review process. Most firms are operating on this process, but they're using incredibly fragmented data, processes, systems, each of these steps. Where AI will start to challenge this and change this is that you'll start to use one system seamlessly across all of these different steps. So something that we're really interested in at the moment is the changing role of technology and the changing use of technology and data. Right now, if you think about if you're an advisor on the call or a power planner, like think about how you interact with your technology. Most of the time, you put more in than you get out. So let's pick on a fact find in a CRM system. You spend a lot of time putting 900 data fields into a CRM fact find. And what value do you get back out of that? Not massive amounts. Like it's good for compliance, it makes sure everyone's got the data they need, but the individual that spent the time putting the data in there is not getting a huge amount of value back from that. I'd say the only thing really that is challenging that is the cash flow, because cash flow you do still put a lot of data in, but you
Mm.
get massive amount of value back from that, right? It's a incredibly interactive tool for your client meetings. It's a great client experience system, but it's one of the only few systems I would say where that's true. AI is going to change that because if you think about how you use ChatGPT right now, you put a sentence or a prompt in and you get huge amounts of value from the response that comes back.
Mm.
That's where technology is going to change in financial advice in the next 3 months ultimately. So for us, it's like, how do you connect these different steps of the advice process together, enable data to seamlessly pass across these steps, and create this single source of truth that everyone's talking about? So for me, CRM systems will continue to be that single source of truth for quite a long time to come. whether that's IO or Xplan or Ningi or Planner, or it's a SharePoint system, or just sitting in Microsoft Azure or AWS, which a lot of the kind of big enterprise firms you work with are doing, doesn't really matter. It's about how do you then have an AI system that sits across that data to make that interactive. And I think the last point of this advice process is we look at this to look at where teams are spending most of their time. And if you think about most businesses right now, about 85% of the team's time is spent in this section here,
Mm,
in the review section, because ongoing advice is obviously a huge focus post-consumer duty. This process of giving ongoing advice, even when there's no changes, is taking up a huge amount of the team's time. So something we're really targeting right now is how do we make this ongoing suitability process as streamlined as possible, as compliant as possible, as personalized as possible, to enable the team to focus back on new business, back on introducing new clients into that firm's proposition. So that brings us to kind of the main crux of today's conversation, which for me is about evolution. Um, the where I'm seeing kind of AI evolving through firms right now is in three quite distinct acts. So Act One, which I'd say we saw a lot last year or the year before that, was around the kind of theory. It was like AI is this new shiny tool that's coming in. Like, what does it mean? What does it even stand for? It's about fascination and possibility. So lots of promises, lots of things that AI is going to take my job. It's going to revolutionize the way we work. But it didn't really come to fruition. Like there was a lot of noise, a lot of excitement. Every single conference was AI every other sentence, but most firms weren't really seeing the benefit at that point. Last year, most of the focus then was starting on to test this stuff. Providers like Saturn and others actually started to get tools out into the market for financial advisors to start to use and start to play around with. And that kind of proof of concept era started to come to fruition. So we ran loads of kind of pilots with firms that wanted to test stuff. They would look around every provider in the market and do a kind of couple of week testing period with each one and see which one they preferred. But most firms had mixed results. I mean, we had a lot of firms that were onboarding and lots of providers did, but most firms were not overly pleased with the results they got from POCs around things like suitability reports, recommendation letters, and there starts to become this kind of growing fatigue and impatience around AI. Like I was promised the world and it's not delivered. AI was supposed to be this kind of silver bullet to solve everything, and actually, it's giving me inaccurate outputs. It's not doing perfect outputs all the time. Like, why would I use that? And we've seen that quite a lot.
mm,
Um, Act three now for me is all about proving value. Now we understand that AI is not this silver bullet, it's going to come and solve everything. We start to understand its advantages and its limitations. And the end user, the advisor, the power planner, the compliance team that are using AI also start to realize that. Now we can start to see the real value, where we can implement it in the ways that are most effective and most realistic. And when we start to see that value, that time conversation I mentioned at the start starts to let us think about where human beings within our businesses are going to be repositioned to. So the conversation we're having with a lot of firms right now that have been using Saturn for a year or 2 years and have been getting these time savings back is what are you doing with this time? And a lot of the time people are challenging the role of an advisor, a power planner, an administrator. And my bet is that financial advice businesses in a year's time won't have those as three roles. They will have a very different looking team structure, very focused on client interactions, very focused on the client experience. And a lot of that back office stuff will largely be augmented by artificial intelligence systems. So, Act three, I think, is where we start to see realistic conversations about what AI can actually do.
mm.
Um, just as the first poll, I'd love to hear from everyone on the webinar, like where are firms right now? Like what era best describes where your firm is? Are you still in that kind of theory conversation? You're curious but unsure as to where it can really have an impact. B, we're testing stuff, we're piloting, we're experimenting with things. Maybe we've done meeting notes, but we're starting to look at letters. And then value is we've deployed, it works. The team is seeing huge benefit. We'd love to kind of see what the split is right now.
So I'm a lover of quick wins, right? I love a quick win. And in business, they're absolutely amazing, right? When we get these quick wins. If I'm sitting in theory at the moment, curious and unsure, how would you move me to pilot and experimenting? What would be your quick win?
I think the question the person in your position should ask themselves is what are my objectives as a firm? Where am I spending my time right now that I don't want to be spending my time? And then you go and find an AI system or a tool that can help you solve that. I think too often firms go to AI providers like us and say, "What can you do for me?" And
Right.
it's for
Okay.
me, it's entirely the wrong conversation. It's like when firms come and ask that question, I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what I can do for you. Like, let's have a conversation
It's a
around.
very political answer. You've answered my question with a question. Thank you.
But I think it's a good one because the beauty of AI is the ability for it to be quite malleable. You can mold it to different things. It can
Mm,
have an impact in lots of different areas. So the question really should be, what can AI do for me in these certain specific areas where I'm spending too much time or I'm not adding value, or ultimately I just don't enjoy. Like AI
yeah.
should be used to remove the stuff that human beings don't want to do.
Mm,
Most firms, we push them to start looking at things like meeting notes as the first step for a couple of reasons. One, advisors should be spending more time with clients, and at the moment, they're spending too much time handing over information to the rest of their team. And some advisors will be very good at that and they'll write incredibly detailed notes. They'll take them a few hours. Other advisors will be very poor at that and they'll throw a scribbled note at a power planner when they get into the office.
they
Both,
don't do that, do they?
we've seen a few. Both of those are bad outcomes though, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want the advisor spending hours writing War and Peace, but you also want enough information for the power
Mm,
planner to not have to go back and forth to the advisor multiple times to say, what do you actually want me to do?
mm,
So creating this kind of streamlined extraction of data from the advisor client conversation gives us the foundation for the rest of the stuff to be done. So making sure that the business has got high quality data before you start plugging AI into it is
mm.
super important. And we'll come back to that slightly in a minute, actually.
I think I have two biggest worries in life, and that's when I get a phone call because I can't transcribe it, and secondly, when I can't find a pen because I can't, I can't remember the last time I wrote something down. Every meeting, there's a transcription tool sitting within that, and it takes down every bit of information that I would require from that meeting. I think the only thing I write these days are birthdays and Christmas cards. Which is scary, right? I can't.
Those are not a moon pig, are they, Lee? Just get that done quickly.
Yeah, I could do Moonpig actually. Yeah, no, I
It's
like that.
it's
I'll go
funny
to
because I was
Moonpig.
in a meeting. I always have a notepad out in a meeting, and I went to a meeting yesterday. It was a first discovery meeting with quite a large national firm, and I got my notepad out and started writing down. And they were like, "Oh, AI provider's got a notepad, and what's going on?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, it's funny, but like for me, I'm using it in a very different way now. Like if you're an advisor, you used to have to write everything down. So
Mm,
you spend most of your time. I used to be an advisor. You're spending most of your time kind of writing notes down and
mm,
not being able to engage as much as you want to with the client. Now, when you've got Saturn doing all of the data capture and you know that everything important is being captured, now I
exactly.
can use my notes for, either pauses when you want the clients to think more about things
Mm,
or key things I want to come back to in the conversation. You start to become a lot more conscious as to how you're using that writing. It becomes a
yeah.
much more powerful thing. But yeah, it was an interesting one. Interesting poll results here.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll share it for the audience as well. Um, mate, a third sitting at around curious but unsure,
yeah.
which is expected, right? You wouldn't expect everybody to be, piloting and experimenting, and you wouldn't expect. I mean, the fact that there's a small minority of people that have deployed it in real workflows. I mean, that just goes back to what you said at the very beginning. People are thinking that people are so far advanced with AI, but the reality of it is they're not. They're either where you are or even a stage behind you.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
quite reassuring as well.
Definitely reassuring, but it shows we've got a long way to go, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've got there's so many amazing tools out there in financial planning right now from all of the providers and more providers popping up that can say they can do more and more stuff, but being really realistic about what actually is going to have an impact and also working with firms that can help you go on this journey because
Yeah.
the testing point. So theory and testing, these are 94% of the people on the call right now are
Mm,
not really seeing any benefit from AI yet. That's a huge majority.
yeah.
Like where you step for me from testing into value is proper implementation. And implementation comes in not just adding another tool and another username to the team's long list of systems they need to log into on a daily basis.
Mm,
It comes on really deeply understanding how processes and systems are going to evolve and also playing into the kind of human side of it, right? Like people need to come on that journey with you. So we'll talk a little bit about, I suppose, some of the key mistakes that I've seen firms make to go from testing to value where it's not worked. But I think that was kind of what I expected. I'd love to speak to the one out of the 18 person in the call that's really seeing value and see where, how have they implemented it? What lessons have they got from that value? Because I think,
Yeah.
I can talk a lot about how we've helped firms go through that process, but a lot of advisors when I go to events want to speak to other advisors that have done it and other businesses that have done it to understand what went well. So I
Yeah.
think that could be quite a good webinar actually. We get a firm on that's done it and we have a conversation with them.
I'm all for that because I think that's something that the audience would want to see is real life scenarios, isn't it? Um, for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to do my best not to talk because I want to make sure that you get through all of your content, right?
Cool.
I'll try my best. I can't guarantee anything.
Cool. Sounds good. So look, just to break down these acts and where we are a bit more, I said a little bit more about kind of theory, and we talked about this silver bullet conversation. For me, it's a conversation about expectations and reality. Expectations with artificial intelligence was it's going to solve everything. It's going to remove all of the stuff that I don't like doing. It's going to create these beautiful meeting notes and seamlessly push this data into my CRM system. It's going to create an automated suitability report. It's the end of power planning. It's the end of administration. It's just going to be about advisors having 1,000 clients. That was really the dream that has been sold to a lot of firms. And there's many articles to that tune that you can dig out in various different press releases and on LinkedIn and stuff. But ultimately, it's not happened. And the key thing for me as to why it's not happened is it's discovered the flaws in the way that we work. One thing that AI is very good at is speeding up our processes. But if those processes are not clearly documented and the data we're using is not very, very good, actually, you're just going to make worse things quicker, which gives very bad outputs. So a lot of the firms that started to look at what AI can do realize actually we're not ready to do this yet because we don't have really clearly defined ways of working. And for me, that was a kind of our faster horse moment. Henry Ford has a very famous quote that said, if I listened to my customers, I would have built a faster horse. Firms are at the moment trying to plug AI into their existing way of working. We have always done our annual review process like this. We've always done recommendations like this. This is the template we've always used. We just want to use this template and make it go quicker. That stuff doesn't work. This needs to be a conversation about how do we fundamentally reimagine and rethink the way that teams are working right now. So if you are in that process of saying, look, this is how we've always worked, we just want AI to help us do this, I would really challenge that and say, actually, sometimes that might work, but it's a lot more of a kind of luck output, I suppose, and really thinking about how we could do something massively different. So theory, I think, really started to unearth a lot of these conversations. People that we've engaged with a lot from discovery calls that book in with us, we have these quite detailed conversations around how do you do these processes right now? Who's responsible for what? What things do you want to start removing? And where can AI start to have an impact? And that conversation, I think, becomes quite a heavy hitting one for some teams, which I think is a really important one to have.
Is that because they don't really understand? I didn't last long, sorry. Is that because they don't really understand how far AI can go? If somebody's doing it in a way and they go, it'd be really cool if it could do this. It's kind of like, yeah, but could you imagine if it done that instead? But they don't understand or they don't know what that could be for them, could they?
Yeah, they're definitely true. I think also as with human beings, we get very excited and we want to do the really cool stuff
Mm,
immediately. We want to do automated suitability reports as quickly as possible. But to have the luxury to do an augmented suitability report as quickly as possible, there's a number of different steps that need to go into that to make sure that the data is right and the process is correct and the handover has been done correctly. And
mm,
you kind of have to do the less sexy stuff first and start with things like meeting notes and CRM data cleaning and things like that to then start to build the exciting stuff on top. And I think for some people that's becomes a much slower process than they
mm.
anticipated. It takes a lot of firms that we work with maybe a few weeks to make a decision that they want to work with Saturn, but a good few months to get comfortable with the new way of working, and then another few months to get comfortable with exploring the next thing they might want to do. So I suppose it's a kind of a slight reality check to say, look, there are some very exciting stuff you can do, but is it too much too soon? Is it not
Yeah.
better to take a slightly slower approach and build up to some of this stuff?
Um,
And the other thing that I think is always really important here is the people side of things.
mm,
We talk a lot about this kind of pyramid of change where you've got kind of processes as the foundation. You need to make sure these processes are very clearly documented. The next is the people. the kind of culture of change. Like, are your team members comfortable with this evolution of change that's going to happen, which, by the way, is going to get quicker and quicker and quicker?
Mm.
And how do you actually start to foster a culture of people that are comfortable in this slight chaos of AI evolution? AI is going to evolve very, very quickly over the coming weeks, months, and years, and it's going to get quicker. How are people going to be comfortable when the way they work changes on a monthly basis?
Yeah, I think the way to put that into sort of relatable terms, as we probably know, I mean, I'd love to know the percentage of the population that has played with ChatGPT, but the output is only as good as the prompt. You know,
Yeah,
if you put something into ChatGPT and you think what that is just so far away from what I wanted, it's ridiculous. That's because of the prompt that you gave ChatGPT, which is why it gave you that response. And it's very similar to what you're saying there. It's only as good as the meeting notes, the fact find, the data cleanse. It's only to get a good suitability report. All of this has got to be good. Otherwise,
yeah.
the output is not going to be nowhere near where you needed it. I'll stop talking again, I promise.
No, that's a perfect segue onto the kind of concept stage because most firms got to that point, right? They tested AI. Most firms have tested something really. They've tested an AI system in some shape or form, and a lot of the firms have said actually it's not that great. I think we've had feedback where Saturn doesn't work for me. Some firms have said Saturn's incredible, it's changed my life. So there's a disconnect between some of the feedback, and a lot of the time it's because of the expectations going into it. And the firms where it's been really effective is they've had a very good understanding as to where Saturn can have an impact from the early stages. So for the firms that kind of steamroll into using AI, they expect something and then the outputs are not quite what they wanted. And then they test another tool and another tool, and then they kind of get fatigue and impatience and give up slowly. And I think a lot of firms are kind of in that stage. The other thing is on the concept stage is, where do I start? There's so many different things that I want help with in my business. Where do I actually start? And for me, that comes from a conversation. Like, here's some case studies and support that we can give that a firm like you might have done and made that decision, or even within our community, here's a firm that look very similar to you. Let's have a conversation with the three of us and say, how would you go about this? One of the things I think is that financial planning has that a lot of industries don't have is the community side of it. Most financial advice businesses are very keen to work with other businesses because ultimately they're not in competition. 8% of UK adults get advice. There's no way we're competing for clients because there's 92% of them to go and get. And then the ultimate reality is that 95% of enterprise AI solutions fail, which is a huge number. So there's an MIT research paper which goes into a lot of detail on this. It was released in December, and it's a really interesting read on all of this stuff, this kind of theories, these concepts, how these large enterprise businesses, and these, we talk about enterprise in our industry. These are like huge enterprise businesses in the States, where they've started to use AI and it's failed 95% of the time. And a lot of the reasons for that fall into three things. One is defining the problem statement wrong. So not really understanding what we want AI to do for us. Two is undefined success criteria, which gives ambiguous outcomes. And then three is that customization creates variance. And for me, variance kills trust. So just going into those three in a little bit more detail. Firms, when they're starting to think about using AI, should really clearly understand the problem statement they're trying to solve. What are you actually trying to do? And save a bit more time is not good enough. What are you actually really trying to achieve within your business? Is it that I want to exit in 2 years' time and I want my business to be profitable by that point, or I want my business to go from 100 client families to 200 client families by December? Like, these are all good objectives that underneath that surface will have problem statements as to why you can't achieve that just yet. What's blocking you from doing that right now? Write those down, and that is an interesting conversation to have with the likes of us and other AI providers that we will love to get stuck in with you, because clearly understanding that problem means that we can start to create solutions together. Once you've then understood that problem you're trying to solve, then you can start to test stuff. But when you go into testing things, if you don't clearly define the success metrics of that testing, you're going to get very ambiguous outcomes. So a lot of the time firms have tested things like meeting notes and they've pulled a few advisors in and they've asked their advisors what do they think. And the advisors have said, yeah, it's good. Like, gives me good notes, saves me some time. But it's very hard to justify cost and change when you don't have really clearly identified success metrics. So we work very closely with firms, both myself, but also our partner experience team, to understand what success is going to look like from testing things, which means the ambiguity around outcomes is completely removed. And then the key thing that we talk to firms a lot about right now is customization. If you think about how AI works, it's these huge large language models that you need to train a lot to get to a point where they give you very accurate, reliable outcomes. If you want that model to train specifically on your annual review template or your suitability report or your file note, you're going to get quite a lot of variance in the output for a long period of time until that system, if you allow it to train, gets to the point where it's very comfortable with that output. That time taken and investment into actually getting to that point means that often people just give up. And you'll see a lot of the time with firms that will say, okay, give me your annual review letter template, we'll build something for you, let you play around with it. Teams start to become the guinea pigs with the AI solution, and people don't have time to test stuff. They want to just get something that works and get on with their job. And for me, the way you do that is by using systems that have been designed specifically with AI in mind. So customization creates the variance of outputs. People then say AI doesn't work, which is not true. It's just giving you a variety of outputs, but that variance then kills the trust and people just give up and go back to their existing way of working. We see this a lot. And for me, it's about how do you start to sculpt and design a future process, a future output, a future report, whatever it's going to be, that works from a compliance, from a partner, from a customer experience, but also from a kind of AI process that gives you a scalable solution. And the last point I want to add in onto my previous point about the Henry Ford was this concept of a seatbelt, which I think is really interesting because we can talk about rethinking the way that we are building processes and skipping the kind of faster horse conversation into having a new way of working by using artificial intelligence. Let's call that the car. But the problem we have with artificial intelligence right now is that the outputs of AI is stochastic in its nature. It works very well when you're doing a thing like a meeting note, because if you and I, Lee, were to do a client meeting, we would write very different meeting notes, but the general theme would probably be very similar. And the same would be true to 10 or 100 other financial planners because they've had the same training. You would give them the same client, they would write different meeting notes, but the main points in that meeting note would be the same. So there would be a variety in the outputs, but the core conversation is the same. That works okay. But when you get into a compliant output, like a suitability report for a pension switch or a DB pension switch, let's say, that's not good enough. This variety in outputs is what kills AI usage from a compliance standpoint. Regulated work needs deterministic and predictable outcomes. So the concept of this seatbelt is how do you start to put guardrails around AI to control the nature and way it reacts and performs to give you predictable, reliable outputs. The way we've done that at Saturn is to buy ATEB. So people might have seen last May, I think it was, we bought ATEB Suitability, which was quite an interesting move for a kind of AI provider to buy what was quite an old kind of templating style system from a suitability perspective. But the thing that ATEB is incredibly good at, one, it gave us a lot of people that have got compliance backgrounds, which is great for us. But two, it's got this rules engine behind the scenes, which is how it builds its templates, which is solely shaped on the FCA guidelines, the handbook, everything. So any change that makes the regulations, their templates update immediately. So this kind of template maintenance falls out the window. Where that can be used from an AI perspective is that becomes the seatbelt within which AI systems operate. So the reports that we generate now are always compliant, just in the way that that process has been designed. So this concept of hallucination or kind of variance in outputs becomes massively minimized. Now you get a solution where teams start to use a system like Saturn and can trust it from day one. And therefore, that process change, that human being moved to a new way of working, becomes much, much stickier. And that's where we see this kind of adoption, implementation, right, became way, way higher than if you were just to use ChatGPT to put your annual review template into and say, write me an annual review letter. That works for an advisor operating on their own, maybe. But what happens when that template changes and the regulations change? You have to start again. Like you need to be able to have processes that are not just focused on AI outputs, but actually creating compliant workflows in the way that they're designed. And then Act Three is all about value. So now we understand the limitations of AI, what can and what can't be done. Now let's start working properly with firms on understanding our regulated environment. And for me, that's where we move from testing through implementation and implementation into adoption. Once things have adopted, now we can start to prove the value. And the big changes that we've made actually over the last kind of 3 to 6 months is a specialist implementation team called a partner experience team who take firms on this journey of going from day zero to day one to getting started all the way through into proper implementation and adoption. And then that team become ready to implement more and more over time where that value increases exponentially. For me, this next conversation then is all about the human chapter. And for me, once AI starts to remove a lot of this admin, we can become more focused on the client. Output for me should always be about client outcomes. That's where consumer duty comes back into it. Um, just quickly before we go on to that, and conscious of time as well, but just wanted to run through the final poll. For firms in the chat at the moment or in the webinar, has an AI project in your firm stalled? And if so, why is that? Is it because there's been too many shiny tools? We don't have a clear use case, not quite sure where to start. One, two, sorry, no support for implementation or adoption. Maybe you've tested service, just not been rolled out. Three, kind of outputs are inconsistent. We don't trust it. That kind of deterministic versus stochastic conversation. And then four, compliance, governance, data security. We're just not comfortable using the system.
I think here I could ask you a question, right, and just say, what does a successful AI implementation look like? But you'll tell me we haven't got enough time left at the webinar. So I'll have to pick your brains and we'll talk about that another time. But how many times do you see firms go from using it to stalled and not using it and disappearing because of the shiny tools? And I think what you mentioned about having that dedicated team now, you must have seen an incredible uptake from testing to implementing because their hands are being held. Because when we're left to our own devices, we'll probably do one or two things. We'll probably use it in the wrong way or not use it at all.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that implementation team has been in an incredible direction for Saturn, right?
Yeah, I mean, our conversion rates, to go a bit salesy, have gone massively up.
Yeah,
But
I bet.
I think for me, that gives a good evidence that implementation is the most important
Mm,
part of the conversation. It's very easy for me to show flashy demos and people to play around with stuff and say that's amazing. It's very difficult to implement that into a team of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50.
yeah.
That I think is where the real challenge in AI adoption is at the moment. Yeah, interesting poll results again.
It is, and I'll share it. And that's the thing. When you look at AI and you look at a lot of tech products out there, you don't get that support, do you? Everything is support ticket, come back to you. And I think to have that team, I think that's a great move. Really good move.
100%. And the other thing we've just launched recently this year is our domain expert team,
Mm,
which they're all industry specialists. They're paraplanners from Quilter, they're head of change and implementation from Progeny, they're very vocal people in the kind of paraplanning and operations community. They now work within Saturn.
mm,
That means that, when I go into a firm and start talking about, processes and change and stuff, I can bring these people that have actually done it into those businesses and say, look, I
mm,
understand these processes. Let's work together to build different ones. And that
mm.
becomes a super collaborative conversation between Saturn, not just as a kind of AI vendor, but as someone that can actually properly collaborate with your firm and support that change,
Yeah.
which is
I
really
think if
exciting.
you look at the 8 out of the 11 people that casted their vote on their poll, it was just lack of support, which is why they weren't able to implement it. I mean, that's a massive ratio, isn't it?
100%, definitely. And the suggestion for a future topic on a webinar is, what is the value of advice when it becomes cheaper to deliver? Because this
Mm,
this is a question I've been asked quite a lot recently. If you're reducing the cost to serve financial advice, well, my clients are going to expect me to pass that cost saving on to them. So my costs are going to get squashed. I'm not going to be able to run my business. I massively challenge that
yeah.
because for me, the value in financial advice is not in that kind of transaction between the advisor and the client. It's in that client retiring 10 years earlier or their kids going off to a nicer school or having 3 holidays a year. So, I would say if you're being able to provide that same service in a much quicker time frame, maybe you should charge them more.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So just to leave with the framework, just to finish off, for me, there's kind of four C's, which I talk quite a lot about. One is around clarity, cut through the noise, disassociate yourself with flashy demos, focus on what are the best outcomes for me that's going to help my business move forward. Two, about control. Make sure that we can turn stochastic outputs into safe, repeatable, compliant AI deliverables. Three, change is really important. POCs, testing stuff is great. It gives you the kind of foundation for a business case, but it's not where the real value comes from. Implementation is the hard work. The initial testing stuff is the easy stuff. The implementation is where the real hard work comes. Own that adoption throughout the process. And the third is all about care. For me, like this conversation should not be about speed. It's about how do we save time to reinvest that time back into client experience and trust and relationship management, which we didn't get enough time to speak about today, but I think it's a whole topic in itself.
Mm,
It's for me, this conversation is about rehumanizing financial advice. We've become so bogged down in the regulation of giving financial advice that we've kind of lost touch with the reasons why we're doing it. It's about, enabling these families that we're changing the lives of to do more of and scale that. So for me, AI should be thought about with maximizing or reducing the kind of admin heavy stuff that we have to do and enabling us to spend more time in front of client families.
yeah, absolutely.
Did, did have another poll,
I
but I
was
think we'll
gonna
share
say,
that.
yeah, there's another poll there. I'm gonna throw it up just because I want to. I know it's 11 o'clock, so I do appreciate if people have got to shoot off, if they have got meetings, then thank you so much for joining us yet again. If you do have another 5, 10 minutes to hang around, I think we're close to wrap up, Tom. Right?
Yeah, yeah. This is the last slide.
Last slide, brilliant. And partly to blame for that because I can go on a little bit when it comes to AI. I think it's transformational for everybody, no matter what business that you've got. I think adopting it in the right way for the right reasons, I think you will inevitably get time back. Yeah, you absolutely will. Then it's what you do with that time. And I think going on the poll results, a few more people want to spend some time on the golf course, and that's absolutely fine. Better work-life balance, time with family, and get that. And other people are more client time. Spend more time with clients, help more clients. Build those relationships, and but that all depends personally on where you are at as a business owner. What kind of business are you building? Is it a lifestyle business? Is it something to scale? Everybody's going to have a different opinion on this, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that kind of 65% focusing on client experience and proactive relationships makes a lot of sense. I think the 29% saying better work-life balance is completely fair as well because
100%.
most advice businesses that we see are working very long hours, they're working
Mm,
weekends, they're seeing clients at all types of all day, all hours of the night, let's say. Like it's a tough business to be in, really, to be able to provide the service that people want to. But I
yeah.
think the solution for that is to not see less clients, which has been one of the impacts of Consumer Duty. Three
Mm,
quarters of advice firms are seeing less clients than they were before. That's a
mm,
bad outcome. That's not
yeah.
what it should be doing. What it should be doing is focusing on why can't that advisor see more of those clients? And that's the stuff that we need to remove. So I think work-life balance is a really fair output from the question. And I
Yeah.
think actually a lot of that is about client experience and proactive relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll stop sharing that as well for everybody. Amazing. Good webinar. Enjoyed that one. Does anybody have any questions? I know I threw loads over to you, Tom. Appreciate you doing your best to answer those on the spot. But if anybody's got any questions about AI, what they're doing, how they're doing it, um, about Saturn, anything at all, fire away. The floor is yours for as long as you need it for. Still quite a few people hanging around, but I do love the concept of AI. What excites me is not what it is today, but what it's going to be in 6 months' time or 3 months' time. Because it is probably one of the fastest evolving industries at the moment. Would you say?
Yeah, 100%. AI for sure, but also financial planning. I mean, financial
Yeah,
planning is the fastest growing segment of finance in general globally.
yeah,
If you look at the US market to where we are, I mean, it's about 30% of US adults get a financial advice. In the UK, it's about
really.
10%. We've got a
Mm,
long way to go, even just to catch up with the US.
yeah.
So I think it's a very exciting place to be within that kind of middle part of the Venn diagram between like AI and tech and financial
Mm,
planning, which is great. But I think I suppose the exciting slash slightly scary thing is not even we know where AI is going to be in 3 months,
of course you
6 months.
don't.
These models are changing at such a rapid rate. I
Mm,
suppose the question to firms is, are you working with a provider that's really got their ear to the ground, understands as much as they can where the industry's going, and can support you with this change that's coming?
got a question for you, right? And it goes back to uh, I think it was Act One, the unknown, and I think it's quite a scaremongering time for a lot of people as well. Have you spoke with any business owners, or have you implemented Saturn, or spoke to them about AI that they've implemented where they've got rid of staff? Because I don't need any power planners anymore because I do this. Have you seen that at all, or have you just seen it shift the way that the business operates?
No, I've not seen any firms that have got rid of staff because of the implementation of AI. Most firms have say we want to lock the headcount in.
Yeah.
So they will say, look, we've got a team of power plants administrators. We don't want that team to scale any more than it is right now for
Mm,
two reasons. I mean, obviously it's an expensive resource, but
mm,
also a lot of firms are struggling to get new talent coming through. You guys will know this on the recruitment side. It's
yeah.
difficult to find very, very good technical power planning talent in the industry. So how do we make the ones that we've got more scalable?
Mm,
Most firms are keen to grow the client-facing side of the business, the advisors, maybe even less advisors, but like client relationship managers, account managers, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be responsible for the day-to-day interaction, but keep that power planning resource locked into where it is.
mm, yeah. Which is nice to hear, isn't it, really? Because I think that was a big fear of a lot of people go back 2 years ago, before the pilots and the experiment, and when AI was a buzzword,
Yeah.
that was the fear, wasn't it? And you'd get these pictures or these reels or whatever you're on, jobs that are going to be replaced by AI, and it's just none of that is really materialized, is it?
I think if you look at a power planner right now, when I speak to power planners and kind of look at their day-to-day time they're spending and look at what they're doing, a lot of that's going to be replaced by AI.
Mm,
I think the role of a power planner is going to be here for a long, long time.
mm,
But some of the work they do, like updating CRMs or waiting for providers to send them information or having to search through various sites to get the
mm,
analytics and research they need to do the recommendation, that will go. But what I think that does is elevates the power planner into a technical support role or a technical client-facing role
mm.
that gives the client the much better experience. So actually, I think when I speak to power planners, I think power planning is going to be the biggest winner here
Yeah.
because it's going to fundamentally reposition the power planner as a super technical resource
Mm,
and less of the kind of report writer style um, image that some power planners might have, which is not where I think the power planning industry should be.
yeah. I think there's a few things that we do in the club for a lot of the members, if you like, when they're thinking about implementing a new piece of tech, or whether they might be thinking about growth and hiring or scaling their business. A simple roles and responsibility exercise, it can show so much clarity as to what's going on. And I think if you've done that with a power planner, if you sat down with a power planner and said, look, within the hours of 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, the days that when you're physically doing your role and responsibility within this business, just write down everything you do, absolutely everything, no matter how small it is, no matter what you're doing, write it down. I think if you fast forward the clock 4 weeks and you sat down and you looked at that list of what that power planner's doing, you could literally highlight bits that you could say, right, we're going to get AI to do this, and you're going to focus on that. The bit that can't be replaced by AI. And I think when we go back to that question, when I asked you a question, you threw it back at me. Um, I think it was about from curious to experiencing, wasn't it? How do you go from I've thought about it, but now I'm going to use it, and then you said, well, you need to think about what's going on in your business to that extent. Was it there or thereabouts? I think that'd be
Yeah,
really
it
cool
was.
if you looked at it and just said, right, well, my power planner's doing this, and I don't want them doing that. How can I give you that?
Yeah, I also think it's the best way to bring the people in the team on the journey with you.
Yeah.
Because if you're an owner of a business or an MD or a COO or something, and you say, we're implementing AI into the business, there's going to be people that are very unsure about what that means for them. Whereas if
Yeah.
you explain to them that these are the areas that we've identified AI can
Mm,
have an impact on, and these are the things I don't want you doing because I think you're
mm,
very good at these other things that AI can't do right
yeah.
now, that becomes a collective
Mm,
conversation within the business to bring everyone forward on this journey.
yeah.
And so pick on Fairstone again, that's where they were very effective at rolling out AI. It came top down. This is why we're doing it. This is why we think it's going to have an impact on your day to day. This is why it's going to be better for the business. Everyone understands why AI is being implemented or SaaS is
Mm,
being implemented, and no one's in the dark at all. I think it's a really good case study for how AI adoption should be done.
yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Unless anybody else has got any questions, I can imagine it's Friday morning. People probably want to crack on, get things ready, so they might be able to have an earlier day if there is such a thing as an earlier day. Perhaps the 30% of people that was going for the better work-life balance have already got it. They're already using a bit of AI, and perhaps that one person in the chat, Tom, that had fully deployed and integrated AI. Perhaps there was a Saturn customer, and they were just seeing if there's any changes to the tech stack. But as always, guys and girls, thank you so much for joining us, the club. Thanks to Tom and Saturn for coming along and sharing those insights. Very valuable. On the feedback form, there will be a part if you do want to schedule some time with Tom and the team at Saturn. Let us know on the feedback form, and the guys will be in touch to set things up for you. Until then, we will see you next time.